The ecological design ideas by the husband and wife team John Todd and Nancy Todd is based on their book From Eco-Cities to Living Machines, Principles of Ecological Design. The authors take a deep ecology approach to the redesign of cities with an emphasis on the synthesis of biology and architecture. Their book presents designs and prototypes that are ecologically based not only for urban design, but also for restoration of pure water, bioremediation of wild aquatic environments, and food production. John Todd is a Canadian biologist born in 1939, a graduate of McGill University and the University of Michigan. He's currently a professor at the University of Vermont in the School of Environment and Natural Resources, working in the general field of ecological design with a strong interest in solving problems of food production and wastewater processing. His ideas involve applications that become the basis of alternative technologies. Nancy Jack Todd is a writer and former dancer who has been active in the peace and environment movement, primarily concerned with applying ecological concepts to address people's needs. They are the co-founders of the Ocean's Arc Institute and later the New Alchemy Institute, and together co-authored several books, including Tomorrow is Our Permanent Shelter, The Search for an Ecological Science of Design as Embodied in the Bioshelter, published in 1980, Bioshelter's Ocean Arc's City Farming, Ecology as the Basis of Design, published in 1984, and From Eco-Cities to Living Machines, Principles of Ecological Design, published in 1994. From Eco-Cities to Living Machines, Principles of Ecological Design, which was published in 1994, is the latest book that Todd and Todd have published, though it was first published 10 years prior. Together, they developed the idea of eco-cities, which integrates agriculture and water in green urban settings, and they introduce living machines, which are technological interventions that are grounded in the principles of biodiversity and systems-wide ecological thinking. Their ideas are demonstrated through a few examples of current and possible future technologies in the form of sketches and working designs to demonstrate redesigning communities, the surrounding landscape, and the ways in which to transform energy, all within what they refer to as the emerging precepts of biological design. There are 9 emerging precepts of biological design described in the book, and they are: 1. The living world is the matrix for all design. 2. Design should follow, not oppose, the laws of life. 3. Biological equity must determine design. 4. Design must reflect bioregionality. 5. Projects should be based on renewable energy sources. 6. Design should be sustainable through the integration of living systems. 7. Design should be coevolutionary with the natural world. 8. Building and design should help heal the planet. 9. Design should follow a sacred ecology. Let's unpack these 9 precepts of ecological design. Precept 1 is that the living world is the matrix for all design. Referring to the Gaia hypothesis after the Greek goddess of the earth, this hypothesis suggests that the earth, together with its surrounding atmosphere, constitutes a continuum and as an entity exhibit many of the properties of life. Quoting from the book, the entire range of living matter on Earth, from whales to viruses and from oak to algae, could be regarded as constituting a single living entity capable of maintaining the Earth's atmosphere to suit its overall needs and endowed with faculties and powers far beyond those of its constituent parts. And the physical and chemical condition of the surface of the Earth, of the atmosphere, and of the oceans has been and is actively made fit and comfortable by the presence of life itself. This is in contrast to the conventional wisdom which held that life adapted to the planetary conditions as it and they evolved their separate ways. Precept 2 is that design should follow, not oppose, the laws of life. Having designated the living earth as the context for our thinking and for our ideas of design, Todd and Todd joined Charles Darwin in asking, what are the laws of life? This precept of design is that biology is the model for design, and so with this in mind, it is appropriate to turn to the natural world with a biologist's eye. Their observations inform us that the cell is the basic unit and building block of life, where it directly participates in the fundamental functioning of the whole organism, where there is a high degree of interaction cooperation between cells. These organisms are at once complete, independent, and autonomous, yet interdependent with other life forms where the ecosystem is the next level of organization and is analogous to an organism, though the boundaries are less distinct, the length between the components are longer, and the couplings are looser. Nature is not static. The natural world is in flux and understands change. The bioregion, which goes beyond the ecosystem, is the next overriding structural unit, forming a cluster of ecosystems arranged topographically and climatically to produce a distinct region. All life shares the same basic information, and time in nature is more complex than time as we experience it because it is marked by seasons and contains lifespans. Precept 3 is that biological equity must determine design. Whether the issues under discussion are political, economic, or technological, Todd and Todd question how will it affect the poorest third of humanity? And in answering this question, they have taken an approach to their design to keep the future of the poor of both developed and developing nations at the forefront of their design work. It has become a design for biological equity, where biological equity is the just access to and distribution of basic resources. Precept 4 is that design must reflect bioregionality. A bioregion is a cluster of ecosystems arranged topographically and climatically so as to delineate a distinct region. This is an exclusive biological concept, but to bring in the human element, advocates of bioregionalism hold that it is an important concept to preserve the biological and cultural integrity of an area. The diversity of culture, identity, geography, topography, climate, and indigenous resources of an area are naturally expressed in a manner appropriate to the bioregion. This is often in contrast with the trend toward homogeneity in cities, which would often include skyscrapers and urban sprawl. Precept 5 is that projects should be based on renewable energy sources. With our massive dependence on non-renewable sources of energy, and this includes fossil fuels and nuclear energy, we need to shift to more sustainable sources, and the answer lies in renewable energy sources. The potential for renewables is not confined to replacing conventional sources, but rather, these technology applications of renewable energy are open to replication in many ways. Todd and Todd argue that for those who still see renewable energy sources being an inadequate competitor to nuclear energy and fossil fuel, they state that the methods used to forecast the sun, the winds, or even next week's weather are still considerably more reliable than those which predict nuclear reactor accidents or global politics which impact oil prices. Precept 6 is that design should be sustainable through the integration of living systems. This brings together the elements of organic agricultural, aquaculture, and renewable energy research. Using the biological world as a model, whenever possible, integrate design and function. This is where integration is maximized and the exacting degree to which the relationships with the patterns of balanced interdependence between the various components are determined. The ecological integrity comes from an integration of diversified, overlapping strategies that mimic patterns of the natural world. Precept 7 is that design should be co-evolutionary with the natural world. Maintaining ourselves on this planet involves a sophisticated attempt at creating a working alliance between human and natural worlds. And a quote from the book, "If we are to prevent megatechnics from further controlling and deforming every aspect of human culture, we shall be able to do so only with the aid of a radically different model derived directly, not from machines, but from living organisms and organic complexes, ecosystems." Precept 8 is that building and design should help heal the planet. In attempting to formulate guidelines for thinking about the kind of design that will evolve harmoniously with the natural continuum, there is a factor that has been little considered now or in the past. It now has become possible to reverse the path of ongoing destruction of the natural world, which, although older, in our time has been proceeding at an unprecedented rate. We can now effect a reversal of the long-term tearing of the planetary fabric because we have acquired knowledge of biology, technology, and the potential partnership in coevolution with the organic world to begin a process of planetary healing. Precept 9 is that design should follow a sacred ecology. In creating sacred structures or communities that embrace ecological principles, the authors are reaffirming an emerging cosmology evocative of the institutions of mystics and ancient peoples. So vast a vision may seem removed from considerations of biological design, but it is the vision that informs their work. Working with the framework of a sacred ecology, we implement the changes that would foster a gentler world. The sacred and the aesthetic have not been fragmented and diverted off in separate directions, as is the case with much of our spiritual and artistic forms. Much of the applications of these precepts were put to practice as they applied to redesigning communities. We'll take a look at a few examples, hand-sketched by the authors, which bring these precepts to life. Todd and Todd note that the evolution of a given settlement or community is constrained by its location and history, as well as by other existing forces. There may be inherited limitations, but which they regard like a skeleton and is the basis for structure, movement, and future action. From a biological perspective, what is inherited is the ground on which ecological ideas are superimposed. The first of these examples here is the neighborhood sewage treatment facility. Ecological technologies are transforming waste treatment locally and using the products economically and ecologically in the community. Todd and Todd considered a sewage treatment idea, which creates structural elements that run along streets. In the image, you can see the sewage treatment facility in the middle, and the homes on the right separated by a sidewalk, and the roadways on the left of the sewage treatment facility. These structural elements that form the sewage treatment structure is the solar sewage wall, which is also how it works. Inside the solar sewage wall is a long, thin, greenhouse-like structure with the south wall and ceiling translucent to sunlight. It creates a barrier that separates pedestrians from traffic. The north wall is a dark, painted brick, block, or concrete mass capable of storing some of the radiant heat trapped in the structure. It is a continuous structure that runs parallel to the sidewalk, and inside, at the intake end, is a sewage grinder and an ozone sterilization unit which kills pathogens or disease organisms. The main part of the interior is comprised of several tiers of shallow fiberglass channels or streams sloped in steps, so that the sewage water flows back and forth and downward through the structure. The water enters at one end of the upper channel and the intake end, then splashed down to the lower channels where it flows back again to the outlet end. Finally, it is discharged pure into low solar water silos for subsequent reuse. Aquatic plants clean up the sterilized sewage effluent. The aquatic plants are cropped and fed to poultry or composted. By the time the water leaves the solar sewage wall, it is ready for any kind of reuse. This recycling process is capable of supporting a whole range of employment fields and diverse economic activities, which contrast sharply with the expensive computer-operated chemical sewage plants remotely sited from contemporary communities. In essence, water can be used far more creatively than we currently do, such as the lake in the city scheme, where there is a covered channel similar to the solar sewage wall. Canal water will be pumped into one end of the wider central channel, and as it flows towards the opposite end before re-entering the canal, it will be heated and purified with the same kinds of plants and microorganisms used in the solar sewage wall as shown in the sketch. The climate of a city implementing such a scheme would be improved, and both daytime overheating and nighttime cooling would be lessened. The second of these examples here is the rooftop farm and park. Augmenting strategies of insulation, lighting, and some form of passive solar heat gain, active solar application includes hot water and house heating. In neighborhoods with row housing, it makes good sense to work with an entire block or row of houses, where a block or row housing can be redesigned and rebuilt to be almost exclusively solar heated and to provide a garden environment all year round. On the inside, in one design, the block is insulated at both ends, and on the side away from the street. The entire roof is a combination of greenhouse and hot water collectors. Hot water for all the houses is stored in a long stainless steel tank that runs along the north wall for the full length of the interior of the greenhouse. It is painted black and is heated by direct solar radiation and by the collection in front of the greenhouse. The storage tank helps to heat the greenhouse and provides metered hot water to the residents. The greenhouse is connected to a common basement via ducts to prevent overheating. During the day, hot air is stored in the basement, and at night it percolates upward to warm the residents. The greenhouse also acts as roof insulation, delaying heat loss from the upper story ceiling, and serves as a common area that is a combination of roof, park, and garden. The ecological design involving solar aquatic heating and cooling can also be used for office or residential buildings, and can be used in a bus stop aquaculture as shown in this sketch, or a sidewalk solar aquaculture as in this sketch. Though our focus has been on the eco-cities component of the book, the authors dedicate the epilogue of the book to envision living machines. A living machine is a device made up of living organisms, usually housed in a casing or structure, and like a conventional machine, it is made up of interconnected parts that function together to perform some type of work. Living machines can be designed to produce food or fuels, treat wastes, purify air, regulate climate, or even do all of these simultaneously. They are designed along the principles evolved by the natural world, and their primary energy source is sunlight. And so, like the natural world, living machines have hydrological and mineral cycles. The authors experimented with a pulp and paper digester designed to prevent waste material in the office. And they also came up with a summary of principles for designing living machines, but we won't get into that here. Recall, the book From Eco-Cities to Living Machines was published in 1994, but first published 10 years prior. In that time frame, Todd and Todd used the precepts of ecological design for redesigning communities, applying such concepts to purification, recycling, growing food, transportation, aquaculture, transforming energy. While reissuing the book, their newest conception was the adaptation of these precepts to living machines. And we can all also still see ecological design in many aspects of our life and cities.